Thanks, Ed. Excited to get a chance to share our experiences and share our work with you. We're two passionate educators who do a lot of work on a daily basis with at-risk learners. So if we can go to the next slide and we'll just introduce ourselves.
All right.
There we go. My name is Amy Horalchik, assistant principal at Guilderland High School, and I am, among other things, one of my major roles is being the coordinator to the Focus program, which is a program that we have for at-risk students at Guilderland High School. And I'll be spending some time explaining today what that program is and what the research is behind the program and what we try and use to help support our students. And I work a lot with Matt.
Yes, and my name is Matt Pensionat. I am a social studies teacher at Guilderland High School, and my role in the Focus program, I'm the coordinator for it. I've been a family teacher in the past, and we'll touch on in a little bit what that directly translates to. I realize that I look like a 16-year-old, but I promise you I'm going to my 5th year of teaching, believe it or not. So miracles do happen.
That's right.
Let's take a look at some of our goals for today.
Right. So today with you, again, we're going to try and make the session as interactive as we can, which is difficult since we can't see you all, but we're going to try our best. We'd like to give you an overview of the Focus program, which is, like I said, our at-risk program, not an alternative program in another location, but our at-risk program within our high school. We're going to talk about the ACEs study and the restorative work that we use to drive our work in the Focus program. We're going to give some specific student profiles so you get a sense of what kind of students are earmarked for a program like this and how they benefit. We're going to talk about community building within our program, which is so important to supporting our students, and then how you can make something like this happen. What kind of staffing do you need? What kind of support you need?
Right.
Sorry, I'm 95. Go Dutch.
So I'll get us started with a very broad overview for right now at what the Focus program entails. And we'll touch on some of the specific components that we believe in what we've seen to be effective for both our students and also for our staff that have been working in the program, spanning years and for some people, decades. So our Focus program, as Amy pointed out, it's a school within a school program. And we have a little over 70 students in the program this year. And so what we do, we all are broken down into families, and the families, they function exactly as the name implies. They become groups and they become close-knit families. I don't know another word to use other than family for
Perfect word.
They really become close-knit families where you have students from grades 9 through 12 all together, and students take on leadership roles. Teachers, I almost call those parents. Teachers take on mentorship roles. And we have a lot of different components, such as a lounge we'll touch on. We have community events that we'll touch on. And we like to focus on 4 separate elements as our key components for the program. And so the 4 elements that we work on with our students, they're known as the 4 A's. And so our 4 A's, we have academics, attendance, attitude, and action. Now, one of the things that I want to make very, very clear and say this up front, and you all know this as educators, as people working with students, there's not really one way to put a student in a box. And we also know that trauma isn't something that you can just put into one box. And so our students, some of them struggle with maybe just academics. Some of them, their challenges with just getting to school. When they're here, they're good, but it's, it might be a chronic absentee problem where they might miss 60, 70 days during the school year, which is a serious impediment to their learning and social development. For some students, we know that it might be a combination of 3 or all 4 of the different areas. But these areas are focal points where students, they are able to identify for themselves which of the A's that they're struggling with. It's a voluntary experience. Students want to be in the program. The families, we meet with them and we discuss with them what the program is going to be like. And this is something where they also do some progress monitoring for their path and how they're accomplishing their goals and how they are moving in a successful path for whatever obstacles and challenges that they themselves are facing. So in regards to our structure for the program, Amy, do you want to start us off with
Sure.
academic support?
Sure, and I'll add that, Matt, I really like the way you use the term progress monitoring because that's exactly what we do. We use the 4As to help our students set individual goals. We set group goals as a family and as a program, but we use those 4As for students to set individual goals. And as teachers working in the program, and even as administrator and the TA that we have in the program, we use those 4As as a way to help move students forward and help them with some self-improvement. So our academic support has changed over the years. The program has actually been around since 1978. It's a very long-standing program in Guilderland. It was a time back then when it was just seen that there's a need for more support for a group of students that isn't related to disability. We do have some students newly in the program who have low-level need IEPs, but really it's not meant to be a support program for students with disabilities from a special education in those 4As. So the academic support, we've had content classes. Currently this year we have an English class, and it's just with focused students. And so you can imagine those discussions with in an English class when you're reading a book that specifically relates to our students can be very different than a typical 12th grade English class. But we've had English, we've had social studies, and we've also had math classes in focus. And another class that we have this year is PE, which is really a root of our program is having PE because we do different things with PE related to team building, et cetera. Another academic support that we have in the program is called Focus Tutorial. Similar to how you might structure a study hall, however, it's significantly smaller. We do that for our 9th and 10th graders. And what we have is teachers who teach English, math, social studies, and science, all available at the same time, all in the same location of the building. And so say you have a focus tutorial with a social studies teacher, but you really need some help in math, we can be flexible and mix those kids around in those groups. And so the students can get help where they need it. And those teachers might be that child's classroom teacher, but might not. And so they can almost provide that tutorial atmosphere.
In regards to Focus Family, this is probably my favorite thing to talk about with the program. I loved every bit of being a family teacher. And what that entails, I'll walk you through my first day in the program. So I walked in and I was like, all right, guys, I didn't know what family was going to look like. So I made an agenda for it, but I didn't want to do content per se with them. I was like, okay, I know that this is, a student-led group, but I still should at least have some plan coming in. And one of the seniors, they said to me, all right, Mr. P, nice to meet you. I'm Ryan, let's get to work. And the students, they got the desks all into a circle and they were like, let's talk. And from that moment, I got the feeling that this was a program that was not only for the students, but in many ways it's by the students. And it's run through them, and every core piece of it that is good is completely centered and derived from the students and their wants and their needs and their expressions of self. So in family, we have about half of a block, so 40 minutes, where we're together, where students are able to talk about their frustrations, they're able to vent. And truth be told, this is an area where we don't have those gloves that you normally might have, where they can be very honest about things. They don't have to say, oh, I was struggling because there's, some bad things. They might say, yes, I walked home and I saw, mom passed out. I am not able to sleep again, and I don't know how I'm going to make it through today because this is the third day in a row where I haven't slept. It might be a celebration of, it was my younger sister's birthday, and this was an amazing time, and our family seemed happy. And so we go through the joys and through the sorrows together. And one of my favorite elements of being a family teacher is being able to step really into that role of seeing everyone as your own children, as extension of your biological family. Some of the things that we've done with them, people will do breakfast in our lounge, which I'll touch on in a second. One of my favorite things was I've taken groups out to go play laser tag, and obviously I didn't take it easy on them. I said, watch this, and proceeded to, go full rage mode on them. But afterwards, made it a little bit softer by taking everyone out for some food. And so you do those things where, truthfully, the group starts to see each other as a family, and so they depend on each other, and they're there for each other in the good and the bad. And that extends into the lounge, and we can see the family element play out into a broader program-wide sense. So families, they're smaller groups where, depending on the numbers of students in the program, that might range from 8 to 12, 13 kids, and we have 6 different families. So in the lounge, you see people interacting across different families. Students will come in the morning and they'll check in. This is where we do kind of that pulse for, hey, how's the day going? Our TA in our lounge, she's wonderful. And that's the first measure for us for how our kids are coming into the day. What's the baggage? What's in their backpack when they are entering the building? That helps us with communication with their teachers and with each other. What are they going to be bringing into family? And it's also a good spot for them to come into a familiar and warm environment. There's also a kitchen in there, so students are able to make some food, which 99% of the time translates to ramen. As you will well note, that is by far the biggest.
But sometimes we'll make larger things, like when we did the tacos, or
yes,
we'll make like a baked pasta that everybody can have. Yeah.
Right. Cookies and different things. I mentioned that families, during family time, you might go in there and cook breakfast. That's always fun. And it's also nice teaching some kids how to cook different things. And so that's just a really great space. And by far the biggest attraction for students is playing Uno. And that becomes a very, very big pull. But it's really a space for people to be able to be away from the hustle and bustle of the school. Students are able to come in during lunchtime. If you are an upperclassman, if you're a senior, you're able to come in during your free blocks. If you are a junior in good standing, you're able to come in during your study halls, good academic standing, you're able to come in during your study halls. And so there's elements of it that are built towards it as you progress through the program, but also there are those communal times that are available for everyone.
Yeah, and I would add that really one of the things the lounge allows us to do is to provide a trusting space for students in the program, so that if they're going through a crisis, or even if they're not, if they just need a space to be where they know that there's no judgment there and they can just be themselves. And one of the things that I've heard as far as feedback from students is, this is what I want my living room at home to be, but I don't have this space at home. And so we really try our best in the program to create that space where, hey, they can relax and get the academic support that they need from our teaching assistant, or handle a crisis, or have lunch, or just take some downtime when they need it, so that they can focus themselves for the rest of the day. So it's really a valued space in our program. I'm going to touch upon community building, which is a very important part of our program. And we'll touch on it a little bit at the end. At the end of our session, but we do a lot of different events for community building, and some of that is community within our family, some of it is within the classes, within the lounge, but we also do larger program activities like town hall meetings. We also do field trips, such as we do a road trip at the beginning of the year, and we do a community service day around November, which we center around a Thanksgiving lunch, where we talk about things that we're thankful for, and it's just a moment to express appreciation for each other. And we started this year a team building day. We do a lot of leadership activities with our older students as we try and foster leadership and community in that way. But that community building, when we look at our students who don't, some of them do, but many of them don't feel connected to our larger building, especially in a bigger school. They just don't feel that connection and sense of purpose within the building, but they do feel that connection and sense of purpose within our program. And so that's why we do such a large focus on community building in smaller groups, but also as a program at large. So I'm going to move forward and talk a little bit about the research behind our program and some of the professional development that we've been doing for our staff, and how it's really impacted not just doing the professional development for professional learning, but also how we've put it into practice and how it's really made a difference for our students. So I'm going to start by talking about ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, which I'm not going to give you a detail, because I'm going to do a little bit of an assumption to say that if you're in this conference, you know a little bit about ACEs. But for the quick background, there was a Kaiser Permanente study done. It was a large-scale longitudinal study that was based on a 10-question quiz about adverse childhood experiences in the categories of abuse, neglect, and household dysfunction. So things like, are any of your parents in jail, or experiences, really a very short quiz And the impacts of those is when they studied the results of that quiz over a long period of time, those who had a score of 4 or higher, that means they said, yes, I've experienced abuse, whether it be by my parents or somebody else. I've experienced neglect. It could be food neglect. It could be, don't have a standard place to live. I've experienced household dysfunction. If you answered yes to 4 or more of those, they have a higher likelihood of not just mental, but physical illness as they lead later in their life. And the results of those who experience those adverse childhood experiences, abuse, neglect, and household dysfunction, are chronic stress, a constant state of fight, flight, or freeze. So what happens is there's a higher level of cortisol, higher level of adrenaline, and it changes the way your brain functions. It actually physically changes your brain. So your temporal lobe, your frontal lobe will not be as developed, especially when you experience these things, abuse, neglect, and household dysfunction. It's a different impact on your brain when you experience these things as a child than when you experience them as an adult. And when you experience them as the brain is developing, there are certain parts of your brain that don't develop as a typical brain would develop. And so therefore you, because of these hormonal imbalances, you're in a constant state of fight, flight, or freeze, which, as we're going to talk about a little bit, really explains how some of our students react to different experiences. So we're going to do an activity with you next. We call this the soda can activity. I'm going to introduce the activity, and Matt's going to read a story to you. I've got my can of Diet Coke here. I'm going to ask you all to pretend that you have an unopened can of choose your own soda. My personal is Diet Coke, but if you want to choose Fanta or Sprite or Pepsi, go ahead. But I want you to pretend that while Matt is telling his story, that you have a soda can. And every time that Matt tells his story, and every time something happens to Julian, the student in our story, every time something happens to Julian that would be stressful or worrisome or just have a negative impact on his day, I want you to shake your can a little bit. Okay, so if you happen to have a can, grab a can. If you don't have a can, just take your virtual can, and I want you to shake it up every time Matt says something that you think would just be something negative, whether it be stressful or just a negative thing that happens in Julian's day. All right, Matt, take it away.
Okay. So in this, we're going to use personal pronouns to make this story and hopefully have it resonate a little bit more with you. Okay, so you are Julian and you are a 10th grader. Day starts, you overslept your alarm and ran out of the house without breakfast. Checked to make sure your mom was home and tried to make the bus. You didn't make the bus, but you texted a friend who was driving and he said he'd pick you up. You made it to school before first block, but didn't get to have breakfast from the cafeteria. So grab some food after first block from the school store. You get to first block global studies and realize you didn't do your homework. Last night was kind of busy at home. Your mom wasn't home, and you had to do dinner and story time for your little sister, Lily. She's in first grade. Anyways, you ended up making it through class without the teacher checking it, so maybe you'll do it tonight or tomorrow. After first block, you go to the school store to get a muffin for breakfast. You get through the line and can't scarf it down fast enough. Although you made dinner for your sister, there wasn't much left for you. You left a note for your mom about getting more food, but you're not sure if she'll get more today. You made it to homeroom a little late, and Mrs. Smith was not happy. You tried to slink in without her noticing. She always seems to notice. Second block was math. It went by pretty quickly. You like math. Seems to make sense. There was a pop quiz, but you knew all the answers and felt pretty good about it. Finally, third block, study hall. Time to get ready for that test in English you didn't study for. Lunch. All is fine. But then, while you were studying the vocab, you get a text from your mom. She never made it home last night, because your grandpa hasn't been well lately. She ended up bringing him to the hospital and stayed with him. She texts you that she's not sure how much longer they'll be able to help him. You ask if you should leave school and go visit him in the hospital, but she tells you to stay in school. She wants you to take the bus home so you can be there for Lily. With your mom working a lot, you spent a lot of time with your grandpa. You want to visit him. You stop studying the vocab and try to find a friend who can drive you to the hospital. No luck. You made it through third block. Go to English, take, and bomb the vocab test. You take the bus home and spend the afternoon with Lily. Your mom asks you not to tell Lily about Grandpa. You spend the afternoon watching cartoons with her. It was a good afternoon for her. Not sure about dinner. Like usual, you'll figure it out.
So how's everybody's can doing? So Matt, we're gonna take some time to do a little reflection, right?
All right. What we're going to ask everyone at this time is to just take a pause, and I'll set a timer on the side. And what we're going to ask you to do is to write about things. What do you do when the shaken can enters your space? How do you respond to that? And as you're writing about this, think about shaken cans that you might know. And we want this to be something that's personal to you because we know that students are real, and we want you to think about how might this directly be your story. We're just going to give you guys a little bit of time, and about 7 minutes sound good, Amy, for writing? 5
We do
minutes?
5?
All right, we'll do 5 minutes, and then we'll
Thanks.
bring you back together. Have about one more minute. All right. That's our time. If you have any final thoughts, we ask you just kind of wrap them up.
I added a couple of extra question prompts in the chat. This is just a metaphor for chronic stress and chronic trauma that allows us to really think about our approaches. Sometimes you might be here that warranted. That's something, as an administrator, something I hear a lot, like, oh, nothing really happened, but a student, kind of quote unquote lost it or had a meltdown. And it's something that you can see at any age, whether it be elementary, middle, or high school. The presentation of the meltdown might be a little bit different or it might not. But we approach the student is a lot about what we understand about why the soda can is exploding at that particular moment.
I'm not able to see the chat while presenting. Would anyone want to share some of their thoughts? Or Amy, would you mind reading some of the thoughts that we might be seeing in the chat?
Happy to. So I added a couple questions. Added our prompt question: what do you do when the shaken can enters your space? And then I added, do you open the can at all? And I think that many of us have either been in a situation in the past where you're a little unsure whether you want to open the can, or have worked with people who don't want to touch the can at all, want to leave the can as far away from them as possible. How do you open the can? Do you just pop it open? Do you maybe tap the top? Are there some things that you can do to help the can open up without exploding? What happens when you open the can? Is it as scary as you might have thought it was going to be, right? And what happens when you choose not to open the can? And then my follow-up question to that is, if you don't open the can a student return? If you allow a student to be in that constant state of fight, flight, or freeze without allowing them to let it go, can they do the work that we're supposed to be doing in schools? Are they able to learn, whether, no matter what class you're in, no matter what level you're in? So one of our participants said that you can see if there's anything you can do for the can. If it needs to explode, tell the can it's okay, and I'm right there with you. And that, the results of that ACEs study is that all of that neglect and household dysfunction and all those negative results that would happen, what would counterbalance that is a strong connection with a supportive adult. And having that student knowing that you're there as a supportive adult can help counterbalance the shakiness of that can and how many times it's been shaken that day, that year, that lifetime. But letting that student, like Jennifer is saying, letting that student know you are safe, you are loved, and you are being heard. And that last one, I hear so often that people don't feel heard. And so it's really important for students to know they're heard in that situation. Please feel free if anybody has any more comments or thoughts about what they would do to their can. Please feel free to add them in the chat. Matt, I think we can move on to our next activity, but take that idea next time you see Next time you either see a student who maybe looks like a shaken up can, and the one thing is, when you look at the can, you can't see inside, right? Sometimes there's some facial cues or, body language cues that let you know that the can is shaken up, but sometimes it explodes and you don't even know it was shaken up.
Right.
So the next piece of research that we focused on as a staff is the idea of restorative practices. Now, I know that that many people hear the term restorative practices or restorative justice, and it requires a lot of training, it requires a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of space. But what we really did as a program, so one of the things as I've been working in the program is it's an individualized program. The focus program that we work in, and we know that every school is different. You can't take a cookie cutter program and just plop it into another school and expect it to work. So what we've done is we've really taken some concepts from restorative practices and implemented them within the structure that we already have without taking more money, without taking more time, and gone from there. And we found that to be successful. One of the restorative practices, just as an aside, one of the restorative practices that we found to be really helpful is circles. And typically that's something that takes a lot of time and almost a dedicated staff member in a lot of buildings in order to implement. But because we already had the structure of Focus Family, we're able to implement a restorative circle without adding that extra resources and support. We decided not to include that because we know that that's not something that everybody has as far as that carved out time. But we are going to talk about the social discipline window, and I want you to think a little bit about when something happens, negative with a student. So let's just give, for example, a student swears at a teacher. You have these four options. If you look at the social discipline window, you have these four options of how to respond. And I'm gonna apologize for the noise in the background. I'm not sure how much you can hear, but I'm just gonna keep going. So you have these four options of how to respond when a student swears at a teacher. You could do something to the student. You could go the punitive route in the top left. You could give them a detention, right? And that would be doing something to the student. You could go to the bottom and you could be like, not a big deal. It's not worth me responding to. You could not do anything, right? And that would be neglectful, really. You wouldn't be addressing it. You wouldn't be really changing any kind of behavior. You wouldn't be helping the student understand what happened and the impact that it had. The bottom right, you could do something for them. You could say, hey, listen, in my class, that's okay. You could be permissive. And the student would think you're really cool because you don't mind it when they swear. But what would that be doing for them, really? Then on the top right, you could use a restorative practice. You could do something with them. You could have a meeting with them. You could really go through the process of understanding from them what they meant in that situation and why that behavior in this example, swearing at a teacher. And then you could say, okay, how do we restore that? So Matt, we'll go to the next slide. And this will give you some examples of how you can be restorative in your practices with students. And this doesn't just have to be from a school discipline to reduce suspensions method. This could be from those more minor incidents in a more ongoing basis. So if we go back again to that punitive in the top left, you'll see that when you do something to a student, when you suspend them, when you give them attention, when you give them a timeout, all of those kind of standard discipline methods, that reactive piece, it often results in a power struggle, a confrontation. And the message that it gives to our students is, I'm in charge, you're not, I win, you lose. Okay. And if our goals, and if we go back to the core values of the focus program and working with at-risk students, if our goals are supporting students, helping them learn some lessons so that they can do better next time, right? Understand more the impact and be more successful in a more traditional environment when they go out into the world. That power struggle really isn't going to help them. If we ignore them, we're going to survive, right? We might have so many things being thrown at us that day. We might just say, this is just not going to be the battle that I'm going to hit today. but the message that it gives to that student is you're indifferent, you don't really care, and you're just giving up on them. And unfortunately, a lot of students in this situation have been given up on by many people in their lives, and that's why they're in the situation that they're in. And then on the bottom right, if we go to that permissive, you're just kind of excusing them, giving them that permission, right? And yes, it's protective, but not necessarily in a good way. And the last one is the restorative. You're respecting the student, they're respecting you, you're collaborating together, you're showing them some responsibility and helping them be accountable. So we're going to do one more. We're going to do one more writing prompt. I think we have. We can do another 5-minute, Matt.
Mm-hmm.
And so our question to you is, how could you take a look at this social discipline window and use a more restorative method? So you could write about maybe an example that you've seen in the past and how you could move from punitive to restorative or neglectful to restorative. What are some things that you could do within your role? So you can feel free to write in the chat or on a scrap piece of paper on the side.
And the time starts now. All right, that's time.
Great, thank you, everybody. So I'm hearing suggestions about, um, you know, um, creating, more open communication and making sure students know that you have a safe space. Making sure that it's a two-way conversation so that the student can set up some goals about what to do next. Those are all great suggestions, but continuing things to think about, that difference between doing something with a student rather than.
Right, right, absolutely. And thank you all so much for this.
Excellent.
I'm gonna, it's frustrating because it's time, but I'm gonna move towards some student examples and just uh, show you some of the the champions and leaders that have emerged in our program specifically. So all three of these students, this taps into what we said from the very beginning, that there's no one mold for a student. There's no singular way that people experience and live through and project trauma. And so for each of these three students, they all have very, very different paths. And we'll start off with Donovan. Donovan is a student that many of you can likely relate to having a Donovan. He's someone that a lot of teachers in the past viewed as being a troublemaker. He was someone who had been up to things where, people like, oh man, this kid's up to no good. I don't know what his plans are. I don't know where he's going with things. Um, Someone that a lot of people would see as a kid where he's doing something, all right, office, and kind of rinsing my hands. Donovan, when he came to our program as a sophomore, um, ended up really making strides for self growth and self improvement. And that's one of the areas that I do want to emphasize is extremely important. That as much as we can do, it has to be a partnership with students. They have to also be invested and believe that you are invested in them as well. And so Donovan, he's grown, and without going too much personal detail about him, he's grown to the point where he's now a leader in our program. He's one of the most outspoken advocates for our program. I actually had the pleasure of having him in US history class, and he was one of my top students. And this is just out of everyone throughout the year. He has grown so much, and we're very much looking forward to seeing all the areas where he's going to continue to grow. Marquay is one of the students that I had the privilege of having in my family, and he is a student that has made me cry multiple times. I have no shame in admitting that. Cry in both a good and in a bad way, and not because of actions that he's done in the bad, but he's the student where he has been just, if you imagine just life throwing punches at you, he's a student where he has just taken punch after punch after punch after punch. And through his words, when he came to us, he didn't really see a purpose in much. He didn't see himself graduating. He didn't see friends as an option for him. He didn't see himself having a purpose in belonging or ever being part of a community. He had been ostracized by family, and he just really, life has put him through the ringer. In our program, he was someone who ended up finding a home, and something that I know will never leave me um, just for the rest of my life is a comment that he made where he mentioned that this was the home that he wished he had, and that he wished that this family had been his biological family. He's someone who, again, had never seen himself graduating, and he just did this past end of the school this past June. He graduated, and he's working, and he just got his own apartment, and he's living and he's thriving. And he's one of those students where really he calls me dad, and I really do see him as being my son. I mean, the age difference thing got to work out, but he still is my son. Liam is a student who is coming from another variation. Liam was an honor student. Liam was someone who teachers really enjoyed being around. Liam is someone who ended up leading the crew during our stage productions and took a lot of pride and honor in that and built fantastic sets. one of which even proctors ended up asking if they could have it. And so Liam was a classical overachiever, but where Liam struggled and where Liam had internal battles was with some family elements surrounding gender and gender identity. Liam went through a lot of battles surrounding this, and he ended up working through, and it was a process. It wasn't something where it was just one day, okay, now they're doing the focus program, this has fixed, all of my internal struggles, this has repaired my family. It wasn't like that. This is something where literally over years, we saw the transition to Liam becoming the young man that he's happy to be. And I also want to be clear, when I'm saying fix, I don't mean as if fix is like there's something wrong with the child. I mean fix as in solve the family dynamics and things of that nature. So in each one of these situations, students all came with their own baggage, but they were all able to find a sense of community. And as we mentioned earlier, that really does begin every day in the lounge. And it's that Uno playing, it's the breakfast, it's checking in, it's Janelle, our TA, helping students with their work and being someone that everyone's able to rely on and know that they all see her as their mom. Every single student sees her as being their mom. And frankly, I see some of that too. She's a fantastic human being, and we could all use Janelle in our lives. And some of the events that we use to help foster that sense of community, because as all of you know, as educators, community, it's an intentional thing. So Amy had mentioned our ropes course in the beginning, how that was something we use, and it's amazing seeing students overcome fears that they had and limits that they had placed on themselves. Some students who may be afraid of heights, going through and climbing this rope course, being cheered on by 60 students beneath them, and the field events that we have there. Our Thanksgiving lunch and community service day is a day where we have board and community members all take part in this, and the students give moving speeches, like just without fail every year. And again, not to expose myself further, but one of their favorite points is seeing me cry, and just really digging into that. We also have some things that are designed, like our team building day, which is designed to foster that. And it's a day where we have things divided up by family and they go through things. We have grade level meetings to foster those sorts of connections. We have a banquet and a picnic towards the end of the year. One of the things that we're looking to bring back that we, because of COVID and other complications, weren't able to this year was a college visit for our seniors. And those sorts of special events, they become things that students look forward to, but also things that we look forward to. And the reason why we're stressing this is, again, it's a matter of time, and these aren't just instantaneous things. So it's time and continued effort and continued and sustained support. And it's that every day while also providing those peaks throughout the year.
So I'm going to talk, I put some notes in the chat there, Matt, but just, I know you can't see them, but you made a point that sometimes people feel like you're in focus, oh, everything's fine now, hands off. And it's actually just the opposite. I see it as the beginning of a journey. Enrolling in our focus program, deciding to join our community is a student saying, I've seen the way my life is and I want something different for myself. And it's really our students making that choice for themselves. And then, we are already working this summer and have been working for the last couple of months, and really started March 13th to try to reimagine and re-envision how to maintain that community in a safe way as we start our schools in a different way this year. But one thing that needs to happen is that if you want to support at-risk learners, it means staff, it means time, it means resources. And we have teachers in the program, and our teachers, we meet every other day as a team. And some of that is planning these events and planning, the recognitions and planning the support, but some of it really is as a support to each other for us to co-plan what kind of social emotional support our students need. And sometimes it's a crisis that a student is in that we really want to talk through. Sometimes we bring a student into our staff meetings. We've done it both because we feel like they're at a tipping point and they need a meeting with the staff to recenter themselves. And we've also done it because we feel like there's unrest within the program and we need to bring some students in to help us navigate how to come back together as a community. Because, like Matt said, just because we build that community doesn't mean it's all rosy. We call it a family for a reason. Think of it as, the ups and downs you might see in a true family. So that teaching assistant, we call her the focus mom, like Matt mentioned. She really is the glue that holds the program together, and it's really important that she's a teaching assistant because she can provide that academic, yet also that strong adult connection support. As an assistant principal, me and my secretary both provide um, support to the program, support for the students, support for the staff. I am at those meetings every other day, and yeah, it's a lot of time out of my schedule, but it's really a critical piece of the work that I do in that day-to-day support. It's really a wraparound program, as you heard Matt talk about. Sometimes the teachers get so close with their families, they want to go play laser tag, or we had a student, who was suspended, and a teacher who delivered a hotspot to his home to make sure that he could do his schoolwork while he was home. And so that day-to-day support, the staff work together as a team. And I know Matt will agree, but our team this year is the strongest I've ever seen it be.
Yes.
And I call them my focus family because I get a group that I get to play mom to, which is nice. And the last piece is district support. Our goal is to keep our students in our building, to keep our students in our program. There are often times when you see at-risk learners that the larger decision is, let's find another program for them. Let's send them somewhere else. And that's not what we try and do. We really try and keep our students within our program, within our school, because we really feel like that's the place where they belong. And we want to help encourage the students to know this is where you belong. We want to keep you with us. And so we almost feel a higher sense of ownership towards our focus students than we might towards our other students, because we really develop these incredibly close. And, so that district support is really important for them to see that it's important for us to keep these students, I don't want to say within our clutches, but within our grasp, so that we can be touching base with them constantly. I know our hour is just about up. I want to say thank you. Matt and we tried in within an hour. I'm sorry if we talk too fast, but we are pretty passionate about what we do. We really love working with the students that we do. Thank you to those who contributed to our chat discussion. I'm sorry that we weren't able to do a breakout group so that we could really hear from everybody. But thank you for your time. If you have any questions, please feel free to add them in the chat. I'm going to add my email address in the chat so that if anybody has any further questions or want to discuss, the program or structures or some of the things that we presented any further, please feel free to email. You won't even have to spell her out check.
And I'm going to include a quick Google form that we have for everyone. It's honestly just something as a help and support for us to get feedback and to know things that we can do better. I'm just going to put that in. If you guys could take some time to do that, that would be wonderful. So thank you so much again for coming. Yeah, and if you have any questions, we are definitely here for that.
Thank you, everybody.
Hey, great job, you guys. This was fantastic.
Thanks, Ed.
Thank you.
It's hard because we can't see or hear the participants. So,
Right.
usually when we do Zooms or Google Meets, you can see who you're talking to, but I got to see you, Matt, so that was
Right. We're trying.